to this today. In this Arya Chema Wadadharma, or whether we call it also the Kagyu nuns, Kagyu nuns Winter Dharma Gathering, but we call it the Arya Chema at any rate. This is for the Kagyu nuns in general, and particularly for particularly in the history of the Karma Kansan. This is the first such Winter Dharma Gathering for nuns. Now, the reason why we call this the Arya Chema Winter Dharma Gathering this is among all the male and female disciples of the Lord Buddha, there were those who were the greatest in wisdom and confidence. They were among those. And so the greatest of those for the men was Shariputra, and for the women, the one who was, there were also those who were the greatest in miracles, the greatest of wisdom, and so forth. And so just as there are such individuals among the male disciples, there are also among the but it is said that among the female disciples, one of the greatest wisdom was Arya Chema, and she also had the greatest confidence. Now, in one aspect, this is showing that that female monastics were the same as the male domestics, in that they're able to achieve the highest wisdom and this highest realization. But the most important thing is that in this day and age, women monastics are indispensable for upholding the Buddha's teachings, and they can have the greatest wisdom and greatest confidence. And so this is the reason, this is the purpose for doing this. And for that reason, we are calling this the Arya Chema Winter Dharma Gathering. And so in the future, when we call this, if we are able to call this Nuns Winter Dharma Gathering the Arya Chema Winter Dharma Gathering, then this is, I think, a very good thing. Now, in this day and age, it's difficult to give names. If you give too big a name or too impressive a name, then it's hard. But if the name is too small, then that gives difficulties as well. But or too limited, then it gives difficulties. But if we say Arya Chema Winter Dharma Gathering, then I think that we can live up to the name. Of course, if we were to call it the Kagyu nuns, but if we were Serucha, they're just sort of limited. It would be for just a little bit of our portion. But if we don't give such a name, if we were to call it another name, like all the Tibetan nuns Winter Dharma Gathering, then the name would be too big. It would be too, it would have too much. And so for that reason, if we can call it by the Arya Chema Winter Dharma Gathering in the future, then I think this will be good. And so here we are having the first Arya Chema Winter Dharma Gathering. Previously in the various nunneries, there was not a whole lot of custom of studying the great philosophical tradition in Buddhism, but in some of the nunneries there were some study, but not in all of them. And so we do need to have a Winter Dharma Gathering. There's no way not to start a Winter Dharma Gathering, but when we start with the first Winter Dharma Gathering, if we immediately were to start with debate of the logic and with the study of the text, it would not work at all. So in this way, we need to take one step at a time. And so here, when we are doing the first Winter Dharma Gathering, we can have we think about a way we should fix our intentions or how we should think. That is what we are stressing. Why is it that we need to study? Why is it that we need to do debate? So it's important that we are all unmistaken about what our motivation is, because if we are mistaken at the beginning, then it will continue to be mistaken in the future. But if we are unmistaken at the beginning and have a good foundation, then it'll definitely work. It's like if you're planting a seed. At first you are careful, and you put the seed in carefully, properly, without any mistake. And if you plant it in that way, the result that will come from it will be an unmistaken result. Now, if the seed is at first not properly planted, and it is not a good seed, then it is very difficult to have a result or a fruit that comes out properly and perfectly. And so for that reason, we are having the instructions and the stages of the Mahayana path, the jewel ornament of liberation. And so in that way we can have begin with the motivation of the bodhicitta, and in that way we can have a good motivation to begin with this. And so in this way, I will be teaching the jewel ornament of liberation. First of all, when we think about the person, the teacher of the Dharma, now there are many things we can understand about this, many qualifications that the master who teaches should have. However, when we actually think about how things actually are, it's just we take interest in the history, but to actually put it into practice is very difficult. For many reasons, the reasons why we actually say the different qualifications, but in practice, it's difficult to find someone who actually has all the qualifications, and I don't have them. It's very difficult to find someone who has them. And if we think about me, I don't have any of the qualifications of someone who can teach the Dharma. But there is a story about Drupal Kinley. He said, it's not easy to teach Dharma. Some people went to ask him for Dharma and asked him to teach the Dharma. And he said, Dharma is not so easy to teach. And because the person who teaches the Dharma either has to have no faults at all, and that's not me because I've got many faults. Otherwise, the Dharma teacher needs to hide their faults and then pretend that they don't have faults. And I'm not going to pretend in that way. And since I'm neither of these two, I can't teach the Dharma. So there's a story about Drupal Kunye. Now here, and what's happening in my time, in my service, it's not that I don't have faults. And so I'm probably just hiding my faults and pretending to teach. So I'm pretending to teach. There's no other thing to do than just to pretend and teach the Dharma. So the person who teaches even if the teaching that the person teaches has faults and so forth, if the Dharma that they're teaching has no problems, is faultless, then it's okay, and then that would be okay. So just as fools often say wise things, and so it does happen in this way, and so in this way, and so it is possible that that this can happen sometimes. And so basically, if I'll just say what is, try to explain exactly what is in the jewel ornament of liberation, and say this is what I think this means, that is what I think that means. And also, since I have a cold, and because of that, my mind is clear, but but my senses are not all that clear, and so for that reason, from the beginning, I actually be able to teach well. I don't have plans or expectation that I will be teaching well from the beginning, but since this is the first of these Winter Dharma gatherings, and historically this is an important situation, I have to put the effort into actually doing this. And so I shall now do all that I can to teach it. Now here, first we have the jewel ornament of liberation. And we'll talk about the history. And this is written by the Drukpa Kagyu Master Kunchen Pema Karpo. And what he said about it is, when Gampopa, before he became a monk, he was a lay person, and at that time he studied with 30 different skilled physicians from India, Nepal, and Tibet, and he became a great master of the healing arts. And at that time, his name was Shangdhamatra. So his name was Shangdhamatra. So while he was a layperson, he met the great master Shadawa, and he studied the stages of the path of them, and he took notes on this. And these notes he gave the name the jewel ornament of liberation. Later, Shangdhamatra went forth, became a monk, and took the bhikshu vows. And at that time, he was given the name Sonam Rinchen. The bhikshu Sonam Rinchen, he went to this Geshe, whose name was either Jia Yunda or Jia Chariwa. He was called both of these. And Jia Yunda had the instructions that came from one of the three great Kadampa masters, Chengawa. And so Sonam Rinchen then listened to these instructions from Chengawa from him. Then he took the essence instructions of Mahamudra from Lord Milarepa, and was appointed as more as the regent of that. And he was giving the name Bhikshu Vajradhara, the ornament of the world, and he became known by that name as well. So when he was the notes that he took, the notes that became when he was a layperson, and then the notes, and so later he changed it later. The introduction, or the verse of homage, when he had first written, he was a layperson, he changed it to read, it was written by the competentness of the Lord Milarepa. But when he had first written it, it said I wrote it according to the kindness of the lamas. So he changed it after he met Milarepa. And then he also added some of Jetsun Milarepa's teachings to this. And I think when he's talking about the wisdom of the Buddha, there are some quotations from Milarepa. So he added several quotations by Milarepa. And then he added to the colophon that it was, he changed it to read that he was written at Dalha Gampo. Actually, it was basically it had actually been completed at the time when he was a layperson, but later he added a little bit to it, and so that is how it was written. However, we can't say that everything that was added. The task was added to it was by Gampopa. There are many different editions of it, and there are many additional texts that are put in it, that are added to these editions. And so it's difficult to say that these are said by Lord Gampopa, and the reason for that is that of all the additional texts that is, some that are not connected to the actual text, and that there's no particular reason to put them. And so for many of the additional citations, there's no particular reason for them. And so for that reason, some scholars say that many that later there are many notes added to the Daba Tarjan, or many additions to it. And so they say that there's some that say they say that they're nothing. But if we to look at what is, we need to determine what is it that is the previous there, what was later added. We need to figure out what Gampopa actually said. And it's important for us to figure out exactly what it is. And we need to do a lot of research into this. As it is during the 12th cycle, it's not a question of century, but the cycle, the 12th cycle of the Tibetan year, there's an edition produced in Yampachen of the Daba Tarjan that was produced in Yampachen in the 12th cycle, which is probably the 17th or 18th century. Now this woodblock edition was later printed as an edition in a small blue book by the Nationalities Publishing House from Sichuan. And in this, there are no changes to what the actual text. And so there are no differences. So it doesn't change the names from Prasad Lam to Prasad Mila and so forth. And there are also none of the additions that are added to it later. And what it says in the preface to this, and so what it says it says that in this text there have been many things mixed in, words of many fools that have been mixed in. So we talk about fools, people who don't really know what it means. But so adding notes and adding, and so the words of the fools have become the actual words of the text. And so there are many, and so for that reason, we're using from the seat of Palmadrupa Toji Gyalpo's monastic seat. They found an old manuscript that one can have confidence in, and using that as the basis, they used that for the edition. And the seat of Yangpa-chen is actually the main monastery of the Shamar Rinpoche. And so at that time, they found a credible manuscript by Palmadrupa and used that as the basis for the new edition. And so there are many different editions of this. There's the Tsipri edition, the Derge edition, the Dru edition, the Rumtek edition, and likewise there's a Palpum edition. So there are quite many different editions. But among all these different editions, the earliest edition, or the most credible of these is the Yampachen edition. This is probably the most credible, and so that has been produced. That has been published in a book form. But if you were to actually get the actual Yampachen edition, that would be good. So now, what many different scholars and Khenpos of these days and age says that in general the True Learning of Liberation is a Mahayana stages of the path. But in particular, it's the earliest of the stages of the path literature for Mahayana individuals, and so it is extremely important for that reason. And so if we need to take what is impure and purify and rectify the errors, if we could edit it and do a comparative edition, this is something that we need to do. Generally, the Varanasi Kagyu Refugee Protection Committee has done some editing and produced a good edition out of that, but still There are a few things that needed to add, and there are some things that still need to be that are still not clear enough. For example, showing the different recensions of the different editions and so forth. It says this is what's in this edition, but it doesn't actually say the reasons for that. It's important for us to do this. And it's important for us to be able to produce such an edition, I think. And this is something that we need to keep in mind. And in any case, the incomparable Dakpo Gampopa his collected works take up 5 or 6 of him, but for them, for his his stages of the path for the Mahayana individualism, the Jewel Unknown Liberation, this is primarily his Mahayana stages of the path work. And now, among his works, there are 2 that he said that where if you read them, it is the same as meeting himself. And so these 2 treatises that are reading them is the same as meeting them. One of these is this Jewel Ornament of Liberation. The other is the Precious Garland of the Supreme Path. Now, the Precious Garland of the Precious Garland of the Supreme Path is like the root for the basis for the 4 Dharmas of Gampopa. But the 4 Dharmas of Gampopa should teach the paths of all 3 types of individuals. And so it is a common stages of the path. The Jewel Ornament of Liberation, you could say that it's only for the greater individual. It's primarily Mahayana individual, so it is not the common. So it is not the common. Now there are different ways of identifying the Supreme Garland, the Precious Path. Now some people say that it is that one that has the different groups of 10, the 10 unmistaken dharmas, the necessary dharmas, and so forth. And they say that this is the Precious Garland, Supreme Path. But Drupa Pema Karpo and others say that the Precious Garland, Supreme Path is a work that is in verse. And that is the one, and that is the one that we mean. And so they say that is the one that is actually meant as being the one in which reading is the same as meeting Gampopa himself. Now, when Joje Atashe went to Tibet, and he wrote the Lamp for the Path of Enlightenment at the request of Chanchu He. Now, and this teaches the paths of the 3 individuals, and this is where this is when the stage of the path of the 3 individuals first appeared. And so it is a stage of the path for one person progressing the 3 different stages of an individual, the greater, middling, and lesser. And in the stages of the path of the Lamp for the Path of Enlightenment, the paths of the lesser and the medium individuals are only taught briefly, and the stages of the greater individual are taught in detail. In Gampopa's, he wrote the Jewel Ornament of Liberation to teach the stages of the paths of the individual. For the Mahayana individual, he wrote the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, and to show the paths for the 3 individuals, he wrote the Precious Garland Supreme Path. Now, the Jewel Ornament of Liberation teaches for the Mahayana liberation, but among this we have there's the causal vehicle of the sutras and the resultant vehicle of the tantras, but this primarily relies upon the causal vehicle of the sutras, but it does have some short things about Mahamudra and about the path of results. And so in this way it does, on the side, it also does teach the resultant vehicle of Mahamudra, but it primarily is the sutra vehicle. Generally, in the Kha tradition, when we do the preliminaries, we primarily train our mind according to the teachings of the Kadampa. Later, when we do the actual practice, we primarily do the actual practice according to the Mahamudra instructions. And this dates from the time of Lord Gampopa. And so for this reason we call the union of the rivers of Kadampa and Mahamudra, the instructions that are the union of the Kadampa, or the mixture of the Kadampa and the Mahamudra traditions. And so generally when we do the instructions of Mahamudra, generally the preliminaries, the four thoughts that turn the mind, the understanding of these common aspects of the stages of the path come from the Kadampa tradition. And when we go to the main practice, then these are primarily the instructions of the pointing out instructions of Mahamudra according to the tradition of Milarepa. And so in this way we have the instructions of the union of the instructions of Kadampa and Mahamudra. And because of this, we'll be able to bring great benefit to many people. Now, Gampopa himself said, now my able to help people is because of the Kadampa instructions. Because most people do, if you give a pointing out instructions of Mahamudra to ordinary people, they won't understand it. If you look at your essence and all this, they won't understand what you're saying. But if you talk about the precious human birth, the karma, impermanence, and so forth, then they understand it. So what is actually beneficial to most people is comes from the tradition of Atisha, and so my able to benefit comes from that. But the instructions of Naropa and so forth, without being joined to so these are very profound and vast. But if they're not mixed with the Kadampa instructions, then they're very little benefit. They don't have very little benefit. And the reason for this is that, as it is said during the speech, all tantras come from the kindness of the tantras. And so, in understanding that tantras come from understanding this is the past, you have not trained your mind in the beginning. No matter how profound Mahamudra be, you can't understand that profoundness. And so there are many different words. Gampopa said, I don't remember the names, but Gampopa basically said, if you remembering impermanence is very profound, and even more profound that is remembering the words through is going for refuge. The reason that these are is that gradually we need to go with the capabilities of our mind. The training that we need to go begin with where our mind is, and then get more and more profound. If you don't start something that's not, and if you sit and with your mouth you talk about emptiness and talk about that, then that does not become profound Dharma. They're just fancier words, but in the meaning, it's like water bubbles. There's nothing to them. And so for those who have a high, we can talk about things of the profound, things of the high paths and so forth, but for them to really be profound, they have to be preceded by the gradual stages of the path. We need to train the mind gradually. And so we're able to increase the capabilities and the understanding of their mind as it gets more and more profound. And so for this, Gampopa himself said that it's because that the benefit for his ability to benefit people came from the Kadampa tradition. Now there are many important Kadampa lamas whom Gampopa followed. According to Kunchen Pema Karma, before he went forth and became a monk, he met the Sharawa Yuntadak. Then he also met Padora. And Sharawa was a student of Poto, and he was someone who actually had memorized the Kanjur, the words of the Buddha. And from he received, as I said before, he received the instructions on the three parts of the people, and first made the notes that became the jewel ornament of liberation. And then he met Kya Yundak, and he received the instructions that come from Chenghawa. Likewise, He achieved the tradition, the lineage that comes from Qinghua. This is before he went forth. And later there's many different the Mangyula Loden showed up. So Mangyula means that comes from the land of area of Mangyula. This is actually the area of Ladakh. It was called Mangyula at that time. And so this Loden showed up from Mangyula. This is not properly Loden showed up. It's not the translator Loden showed up, but from someone from Mangyul named Loden showed up. And so it came from Mangyul or Ladakh. And so this is the Ladakh Sanskar. This is the tradition from Sanskar and Ladakh. And he also did from Chaduzin, he studied Vinaya and so forth. And from a student of Milarepa, he received instructions on meditation and developed samadhi meditation. Then from Geshe Chayu, he also studied with him, and Chayu was a student of Buddhism. Then Geshe Chinsumpa. And this is a study of Gompowa and Lompowa. And he studied with Geshe Nyumrumpa, whose actual name was Chutinpalu. And who's studied much with him. And Lungshe, the area of Lungshe, he was this Nyumrumpa. Then he also studied from Gyayunda. Some people say that he was a study of a great yogi. Others say that he was some that he was study of the Kadampa master Naljaba, some that he was a student of Potowa. But in any case, he was but in Kumapema Karpo's works, he said he was someone who had all the instructions of Chengawa and other masters, and developed realization. So this Gya Yundak, Gya here means the name of a region called Gya. So the Gya Yunda had another name, and what was that name? And I remembered it this morning, but now I've forgotten it. In any case, Gya Yunda has come from Gya, and he built a temple in there, and so he was the patron of that, or Yundak, so he was called the patron of Gya, so the Gya patron. So Chakri, the name of the temple is he developed or built a monastery named Chakri, so it's called Gya Chakriwa because he built the Chakri. He was also called the Gya patron or Gya Yundak. But these are the same person, whether you call him Gya Charikwa or Gya Yundak. Sometimes people might think that they're different people, but actually it's the same one, same individual. And from him, and from Gya Patron, he received the 5 Dharmas of Maitreya and Shijin. And from Nyugrumpa, he spent 9 months. He spent 3 years with Gya Yunda, studying the stages of the path, developing renunciation and the Buddhist and the Mahayana motivation. Some people also call him Charuk Yongkao. Charuk Gongkawa was the name of the person who developed the name Cha Kunda. But it's the same person as Cha Kunda or Gya Yundak. These are the same. So at any rate, it is from him he spent 3 years studying. And I asked him to give me the Dharma robes, and if I need to practice, if I'm going to practice Dharma, then please give me the Dharma. And Potowa said to him directly, I don't have anything to give you. And so this probably they didn't have a karmic connection with Potowa. And so he thought, perhaps Potowa doesn't have much compassion. It isn't really, it's not that a question of Potowa is not compassionate, but really they didn't have a karmic connection. So then after that he went to Mangyuala Loden Sherab, who was the abbot and the ritual master, and they had and he took the bhikshu vows. And then he kept the trainings of the bhikshu, and he studied with many different Kadampa masters. He had many spiritual friends. And during that period, if I don't say a little bit about the story, just sort of, if I don't, a little bit of the details of the story. Now, one time in a dream he dreamt that he was sitting in Sabadamba, and in that there was a great yogi, an old man who came to him, a very big person, and that person placed his hand on his head, and he began, and tears shed from his eyes. He told his Kadampa friends about this. His Kadampa friends, they said, "Oh, that's terrible. That's probably a Pehar, a ghost who's doing this." And so you need to receive you need to serve the monastery and receive an empowerment. So you choose an empowerment of a chawa and start the monastery. But he had experience of feeling like he was waking up. Then at one time, there's a great famine that happened in that region, and there were many beggars who came by. So one time he went out to go outside the monastery for a little walk, and he saw 3 beggars there. They were talking on the side, and these 3 beggars, one of them said, "We have very little merit," said one of them. And the other said, "We had very little, but if you had a great, but if you had something," one of them said, "if we had just some good meal to eat, that would be nothing better than that." Another said, "But what point is there to that? If we had some real sign or something, then if I would be given some great position, if that happened, I'd be satisfied." And the third of them said, "There's no point to having some sort of great title. That is, you lose it when you die. But really, what I would do is because you have to become like Milarepa, because if you do that, you don't have to wear clothes on your body. You can eat whatever for your living. And he can fly in the sky, and he has no fear of birth and death. So if he can become like him, then I think there's nothing better than that." And so they all exhaled deeply. When he heard, this is the first time that Gampopa heard the name of Milarepa, and at that time that he heard it, he without any control, he just felt great faith, and had this great feeling of real pleasure in his mind. And he fainted at that point. And so after he fainted, then he regained his consciousness, and he shed many tears, and he thought about Milarepa. He said, "Milarepa, I really have to meet Milarepa." And so he prayed so that he can receive it. Now at that time, Milarepa was at Tamarkotu. And at that time, I was staying there. There was a Rechendojo Chapa and Shiwa Sewa Repa and Rigon Repa, Panzan Gopa, and all of his great assemblies, as well his Zese and Nyama, and all of his late women disciples, and he's turning the wheel of Dharma at that point. At that point, Rajapad And the other Repas said to Jetsun, you're getting old. If you were to pass to another life, to another film, what would you Repas? Who would? We need someone to take your place for us to fill our hopes and for the sponsors to develop. And so if Hugh Milarepa would appoint a successor, then it would be very good. Otherwise, our Dharma line we wouldn't have someone to be able to hold up our lineage and hold up our and uphold our history. And so they say, what would be best for us to do? And at that point, Milarepa said it started to scowl a little bit. There is a student who will uphold my, but who it is, I still haven't. If I looked at this tomorrow, I have to look, and so tomorrow I'll be able to tell you about who that is. I've had a prophecy from the Dakinis in the past, but I still don't know. I'll give you a prophecy tomorrow. So the next morning, everyone gathered. Milarepa said to all these students, with a real smile and a very happy, the being who will be able to receive all my instructions, like pouring milk into a vase, who is a monk. It says there is a bhikshu named Physician, and he is the one, and he will come. Because last night in my dream, offered me a pure white crystal vase, and he came to me, and I from a white silver vase poured all of my amrita into that white crystal vase completely. And I dreamed that last night, so that is the one. So the person will be able to eliminate the Buddhist teachings like the sun, who will spread the teachings, will come. And so he was very smiling and very happy with it. So that's what it. And so he's the one among humans who will be able to uphold my teachings, he said. At that point, then I think Gampopo was very far away. He thought to himself, I need to do this. If I don't do that in this life, the next life, we would have no idea. Then may I be born wherever Milarepa is. And he made this strong aspiration. Now at that time, he looked for the three beggars to see where they went. And so no one knew anything about the three beggars. No matter whom he asked, there was no one who knew anything about the three beggars. And so he saw the beggars on the road, and he asked them. When he came to when he saw the things, he said, the beggars went very, very slow. They were tired, and they didn't go very quickly. And so he followed them down the path, and then so he went down the path, and he followed them down the path, and he got very extended. He had nothing to eat, nothing to drink, and was just got exhausted in the end. And at one point in the path, it said that he lost his consciousness, and said that a Kadampa monk came and gave him a little bit of water and sprinkled some water on him. At any case, at that point, he went to Jing, and then from there he went to. And when he went to Jing, when he asked where Milarepa was, and he asked everyone around. At that point, there was a patron. They said, "Where have you come from?" And so and Buddha said, And he said, I'm from the from the central land. I've come looking for Milarepa. And the sponsor said, I'll come and I'll give you some food. I'll invite you in. But and the patron said to him, we knew that you were coming. The Jetson said that you were going to be speaking. So when you're coming along, and he saw how difficult you were while he was sitting in his meditation, and he blessed you in his meditation. So he said that who brings you to see him, so the person who invites you, will definitely go down the path to liberation. So tomorrow I'm going to to escort you to meet Milarepa. And so when Gampopa heard this, he got a bit prideful about that. So that Lama said, I really have a karmic connection. He got a bit prideful about it. And when he got a bit prideful about it, then Milarepa knew this. And in order to smash his pride, he didn't meet him for a month or for half a month. Probably not a month, probably half a month. He didn't give him an opportunity. So after a fortnight, he actually, Gampopa actually met Milarepa. When he met Milarepa, he offered some gold but the Milarepa didn't take the gold, and he threw all the gold up in the sky and said, I'll give this to Marpa the translator. And so this is said in the history that he just tossed it in the air. He said, gold and this old man don't agree. And I don't have anything to keep any tea. I have nothing to boil tea in. So from that point on, so what is your name? He asked. My name is Sunam Rinchen, said Gampopa. So Sunam Rinchen is, you have had a great accumulation of merit, and you are an upholder of the precious teachings. And so at that point, he's called the Sunam Rinchen. And so at that point, he had a cup of white Chang beer, and so he gave them to him. Said, please drink this right away. Now, of course, he was a Kadampa master and a bhikshu who had gone forth. He said that around him there are all these different people, and he's kind of embarrassed to drink in front of them. So the Milarepa said, drink without any doubt. And so without any doubt, he just drank that skull cup full of beer. And so this made the connections that he'd be able to receive all the instructions. Now that's what there's more talked about in the there are more stories about this in Milarepa's life by this student who was a physician. Then Milarepa, because of through the Sindara Mandala, gave him the empowerment of the Vajravati. Then he gave him the instructions. And so when you receive the empowerment instructions from a qualified master, you achieve you achieve Buddhahood in this lifetime. But if you do not have the right connection, if you do not receive the blessings, then no matter how many instructions you have, you will not be able to transcend the three realms of samsara in this life. And so at that point, there are many different dreams and things that Gampopa had while he was seeing this. And Milarepa gradually gave Gampopa instructions in recognizing the nature of mind. Now, after a month later, he saw the face of the Yidam deity. And at that point, he went to see the Yidam deity. And so this is probably because if you have a lot of so now you are probably you in the future will see the Dharmakaya. So now you need to go to the region of U, or the central region, central Tibet. And so whether you achieve the Dharmakaya or not depends on whether you have the devotion of seeing the actual Buddha. He had great Buddha. But someday you will have faith and devotion that is unlike the devotion that you feel now, no matter how strong it is. At that point, then you will realize the nature of mind. And then after you stabilize your realization, and then nurture your disciples. And then Milarepa predicted the prophecy of the names of the mountain retreats where he would stay. And so at that point, Milarepa was very pleased, and then Milarepa escorted Gampopa off. And there's much to say about this, but I won't say it right now. Then Milarepa, as I mentioned before, Milarepa had something to go to do meditation in different places. And so basically he spent 12 years in a sealed retreat. And what that's meant in a sealed retreat is that you build is that you wall in with stone the door of your retreat, and you have someone else bring it. Then at that point, he's prepared to this, and the Dakinis appeared to him and said, rather than spending 12 years in retreat, it'd be better to spend 12 years benefiting beings. And so at that point, later, he went to Dapalhaja, the area of Datla, and then the three men from Kham, and many other many other people held up as lovers. But the primary among the three men from Kham, these are Pamodruma, Duzum Khenpa, and Salton Shogom. These are the three realized masters from Kham, the three men from Kham. And in 1153, he passed away. And so for that, Lord Gampopa, what Milarepa said about him is that there will be someone, a bhikshu who will come and uphold the lineage of Miya Yogin, and this will uphold the teachings of the Buddha. And so, previously in the time of Marpa and Milarepa, it was primarily householders in the Kaji Buddhism. Then from the time of Gampopa on, it was primarily monastic who became. And so there is so just as the Buddhist teachings depend upon the foundation of the teachings, the Sangha, the monastic Sangha, in the same way, following that, from that time on, the primary followers of the Kagyu have been monastics. And also, as Milarepa said, so just as I have the name that will become the Dakpo Kagyu, it will not be the practice lineage of Milarepa, it will be the practice lineage of Dakpa. And so now we call it the Dakpo Kagyu lineage. And this will become it's from that time that it is been called the Dapo Kagyu. This is because of the activities of body, speech, and mind of Gampopa and his qualities of wisdom, love, and power that he has been able to uphold the teachings in such a way that they still continue without weakening until this point. And this is primarily because of the resolve, the aspirations, and the qualities of wisdom, love, and power of Gampopa himself. And so for these reasons, for today here, there are many different treatises that he has done, but there are two that are said to be. We are teaching the Jewel Road of Liberation, which is said that encountering this text is the same as meeting me. So, as it says in this, the primary cause is the essence of the well-gone one. The working basis, precious human body, is excellent. The contributing cause is spiritual master. The method body is the spiritual master instruction. The result is the body of perfect Buddhahood. The activities are benefiting sentient beings. So these is a summary of this. And so if we talk about this, so generally, I have received instruction on this from the Lord of Refuge Bokar Rinpoche once. Then recently, from the Dzigar Kempo Tidor, together, and we also with Shinle Dorje from Dzigar Monastery. We had a lot of discussions about this jewel ornament of liberation. And so this is my lineage for this. So if you talk about this, it's called the jewel ornament of liberation, the wish-fulfilling gem of noble teachings. I prostrate the noble magician of whom I pay homage to the victorious ones. There follows the holy Dharma to the lamas for their foundation. This noble teaching, which is like the wish-fulfilling jewel, which would be written for the benefit of myself and others, by depending on the kindness of the lamas. Now, as I mentioned before, here during the homage, as I mentioned earlier, there are differences. Some say to the result by the kindness of Lord Mila, and some because of the kindness of the words of the Lama. So these two different variants of this line. And so when these two occur, according to Kunchen Pema Karpo, the great Drupal master. So basically, there are notes that he wrote when he was a layperson. Then later, after he met Milarepa, he then changed them later to read by the kindness of the Lord Mila. But if we look at the manuscript that came from the Papua Drupa's monastery, it says by the kindness of the Lama. In that it says by the kindness of the Lama. It does not say by the kindness of the Lord Mila. So generally the Lord Mila is probably not correct. So generally we talk about generally if we talk about the body of this, there are the verses which I have just read, the primary causes, the essence of well-gone ones, the working basis of precious human life, and so forth. Basically it's like we have a root. If we're going to plant barley, you have to have this. You need to have. If you want to have a good crop, then you have to good seed, which is barley. Then you need a good field to put this in, and then you need to have all the conditions of water and fertilizer and manure and so forth. You also need the methods, which is tilling and cultivating and so forth. And so that's the merit that you have that. Or you need to have the agricultural work of the farming work of actually cultivating the land. And if you do that, then you receive the result, which is good bay. And then that is able to fill the function of performing the function of filling your stomach and so forth. And if in the place of this, if you have a person who's so generally what all Mahayana people need are all these conditions and causes and interdependence working together. And so for this reason, we have the cause, the working basis, the contributory cause, the method, the result, and the activities. And so it is in terms of these that we have these the six summaries. And so we will go through this. Like if we're planting a field, when we're planting a field, we need all of the conditions to come there. Likewise, in order to achieve the state of Vadadara, we need to have all of these different conditions come together. Now, normally, you say that all sentient beings are able to, when talking about this, you said that we have that all sentients are able to, that we are able to receive the activity of the Buddha, that we have the cause, the Buddha nature, and so forth. And improving this, generally, we're talking about the naturally present family, or the Buddha nature, the essence of the Tathagata. All sentient beings of the three worlds, we sentient beings of all the three worlds, without any difference in greater and smaller in body, with no discrimination anywhere. It is present within all of us. But because it is there, that is the basis. But because of that, there is the differences in our support. There are differences of whether we're able to achieve liberation or not. So if you think about birds and pigs or other animals, then they don't have a bodily support that is able to for them to achieve them. They don't have much opportunity to achieve liberation. However, but the best opportunity for achieving liberation, the best support for that is the precious human body. The body with the 8 leisures and the 8 freedoms and the 10 resources. And so this is the best. And so the human body, of course, and not just human body, it's just merely taking human body is not necessarily a precious human body. But when you have a human body that has the 8 leisures and the 10 resources, then this is a precious human body that is difficult to obtain. Some people say this day, in the world, there are so many, that there are too many people in this world. And so for me, when you talk about your inspections, when you talk about the precious human body, it's being very rare. And what does that mean? If we have overpopulation in the world, how can it be possible that how can the human life be precious? Now there's a point here that needs to understand. Merely getting a human body is not necessarily a precious human body. We need to have the 8 leisures and the 10 resources. But, of course, taking a human birth is good. But if we're going to be able to call it a precious one, then we talk about it in terms of we talk about it being difficult to find. We talk about the examples and the count and so forth. And so if we think about this, so when we mean a precious human body, we mean one that has the 8 leisures and the 10 resources. And so the difference. The different lack of freedoms, the different comments, and these are mentioned by Longchen Ronchen in his The Rest for the Mind and so forth. And for many people, when they have all the fundamentally they have all the fundamentals, but then the circumstantial conditions don't prevent them from entering the Dharma. So basically, this is the human body. We talk about human beings. Well, the feature that we have that's different than is that we have the power to be able to distinguish what we should do and what we should not do. We should be able to know what needs to be done, what needs to be given. We'll be able to decide what is good and what is bad. We have the intelligence and discernment to be able to do that. However, up to a point now, we have used our intelligence to be able to tell what should be done and what should not be done improperly. We've been thinking about our own individual benefit, our own individual profit. We've been thinking about only about the own profit and loss for ourselves. And so this is, if we were thinking about our own ultimate benefit, that would be fine, but we only think about the temporary benefit, the temporary profit. Not only that, we think about other sentient beings than ourselves. And in order to bring ourselves happiness, we give difficulties and hard times to other people and to other beings. We use them improperly. It's like we treat other people badly as a way of becoming happy, and so in order to bring ourselves happiness, we treat other people poorly. Like when we make ourselves in order to make ourselves happy, we eat meat, but in order to do that, we kill and we slice and butcher other sentient beings. Actually, this is inappropriate. It's not correct to do this, and it's really quite arrogant of us to do this. I don't know how we can talk about this in words. But so this is how. And so this is how, but we just pretend that's how it is. For these reasons, up to this point, even though we have the discernment to know what we should do and what we should not do, we don't use it, and we use it improperly. And this is even worse than not having such intelligence. because if we didn't have that, then we would, because we use it impromptu, there's a great, tremendous loss or a tremendous disappointment or destruction of the sentient beings. For example, we used to think that lions, and tigers and so forth were the terrifying beings. When we first had the first environmental meeting, and we were talking about the, we were saying that you need to protect tigers. These, since it is nearing extinction, it's something we need to protect. And at that time, and the person who was describing this, the organizer of the conference, and the many different kappas and lamas didn't fix it. Why do we need to protect tigers? They said. Tigers are not, sort of mindless kind animals like deer and so forth. But the tigers eat all of those animals. Later, then, when it came to the end, the speaker is having difficulty, and she said to me, "You have to tell them why is it you need to explain according to Buddhism why it's important that we keep the tigers." Now, for myself, reasons. I had to think of some reason, but tigers reasons. The tiger is not. If the tiger is such a, so I couldn't think of things, but I had to make something up. So what if? But I said, well, what if it's the tigers are actually bodhisattvas who taken a bodhisattva who taken a tiger's body? But in any case, actually, when you look at it, the tigers are terrifying beasts. So the carnivores are most terrifying, but actually the most terrifying of all beings, the most fearful, the most awesome or terrifying of all beings is actually human beings. No matter how terrifying a tiger might seem, we human beings, they're not nearly as terrifying as we human beings. When I think of it, tigers don't have big wars, world wars. Who is it who kills all the sentient beings? It's human beings who do that. It's the most terrifying sentient being is human beings. So if we're going to need to eliminate the terrifying beings, we need to eliminate human beings. And so for that reason, we human beings, from one perspective, we have our own particular features and qualities, but if we use them improperly and wrongly, then we become terrifying and fearsome beings, and become the most fearsome and terrifying species here on the earth that can destroy all that. And we can also the one who can create the hardest storm that destroys and lays waste to the earth. And so we have a huge number of such faults. So merely being a human being is enough. We need to take the responsibility of human. Whether we're talking about as the bosses of the world or the owners of the world, or we think we're the masters of the world. But actually the master of the world, you have to wonder who actually is the master of the world. Actually, it probably should be the animals. If we talk about it in terms of scientific explanation, humans have only been here for 1 or 2 100,000 years. But so Homo sapiens species has only been here for 100,000 or 2,000 years. So really no more than that. There are some species of animals that have been on this earth for millions of years. So who should actually be the master of the earth? However, our intelligence but just having intelligence doesn't mean that we can do whatever we want. What it means, our intelligence means that we need to protect other things. We need to bring happiness to other sentient beings. If we just do whatever we want, it does not mean that we can do whatever we want. And so for this reason, we absolutely must to have a meaningful human life or a meaningful, precious human body is something. we need to make it something that will bring benefit to ourselves and others. And in order for this to happen, we need to have the different conditions. So one of these is the spiritual friend. We need to have a spiritual friend who teaches us the methods properly, without mistake. When we talk about a spiritual friend, we think finding a lama is very difficult. Many spiritual friends come to this. So a lot of people come to me from abroad and they say, "Where is my lama? Tell me." So to say, "Tell me who my lama is." You need to have someone that I can point my finger and say, "But." And I really don't know whether they're common. It's hard for me to tell whether people are qualified lamas or not. But if you think about it from one perspective, in this world, in this society, if you're going to learn how to draw or something, you need to go look for a master. You need to find someone. And eventually you find a master who can teach you how to paint. And when you're drawing and painting, you find someone who can find it. And from one, if it's like having the wish to practice, or we don't have much wish to achieve liberation or much wish to practice it, so that we don't really find someone who can teach it. If you really have the wish to achieve liberation, as the master of the past did, the wish, the strong wish to practice the Dharma, then definitely you'll find an authentic guru. It's impossible that you won't find them. And so all sentient beings, and all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are just waiting to perform benefit for sentient beings. But the difficulty that we have now, it's like we've closed the door. And so when there are people who are outside who we can't meet. So we've closed the door to our house, and the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are sitting outside waiting to bless us. If we were to open up the door, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas would crowd, they would push their way in. And so they say, me. And so if it's this way for all sentient beings, so basically if you have the real true wish to practice the Dharma, and the unmistaken wish for liberation, then you definitely will find a lama who is a spiritual friend. Often when we talk about following a lama, following a spiritual friend, it becomes really problematic. It's like we have to. We read many different presentations and different descriptions of it, and we think it's something that we can't actually happen. We have many misconceptions of what it is. And so it's something that doesn't match the actual things, and we have many exaggerations that don't match how things actually, the actual way things are. But if we have the attitude of someone who really wants to practice the Dharma, who truly wishes to find liberation, then it's impossible that you won't find someone who can lead you, a spiritual master. And so now we may say that these days, so there are many people who say that there are no qualified masters in this world. But it's not so. Actually, there are people who with the characteristics. Basically, the Kadampa master said that there are two different types of masters: the ones from whom we receive Dharma teachings, and those from whom we receive practice teachings. These are the two types. And those from whom you ask the Dharma, so those for those the people from whom who are able to teach you the Dharma, the words. These are the people. But if you want someone who can actually teach you the practice, who can actually give you the instructions on what you need to do and what to give up, in order to know that, you need to practice. And it's not okay to just talk about someone who can speak facilely. You need to have someone who actually has real practice. Someone who has mixed the Dharma into their own being. And so you need someone who can give you direction, who can give you advice. Generally, if somebody's about Dharma instructions, even if they don't have much Dharma mixed in the beginning, if they are able to express the Dharma clearly, then that's fine. And so for that reason, sometimes we need because of this, sometimes what we think is, generally when you practice the Dharma, when you're a new Buddhist, you think, we need to when you come to know so when we're new students, what we need to do, we need to find someone who can teach us where the school teaches us, who teach us a little bit about that. Then gradually we come to understand how important the spiritual friend is and what the characteristics of the spiritual friend is. And then once we understand that, then we can go look for a spiritual master with all the qualifications. And then at that point, then I think it's fine to understand this. Generally, if we look for the spiritual friend, if we don't know what the characteristics of it and how to serve the spiritual master, then we sort of leap into it and then say that I'm going to follow the spiritual master, then that's extremely dangerous. We don't know whether we we don't know if we're able to meet the spiritual master, and if we're able to serve them properly. There's doubt that we'd be able to do that. And so that is the type of judgment. Then there's the method, is their instructions. So what does a spiritual master do for you? A spiritual master does not fix everything like repairing like a machine that has gone with it. It's not like a calling a repairman to fixing something. You don't have to do anything yourself. The repairman comes and they just fix everything. You don't have to do anything yourself. But a spiritual friend does not do that. What a spiritual friend does is they give you the instructions. They explain clearly what it is that you need to do to practice the Dharma so that you understand it. And so once you understand that, then the spiritual friend's practice is done. There's nothing else for them to do. It's not like the spiritual goes into your brain and fixes all of the channels and all the connections in between the brains. It wouldn't help you to fix your brain in that way. So really, it's understanding the Dharma, but actually going into fix up your brain wouldn't help much. The main thing is that we need to practice the methods and the key instructions that the person is. It's something that we need to understand ourselves. And just as we understand them, we need to practice them. And we need to put them into practice in them. And if we are able to do that, then only at that point are we able to actually change ourselves and alter our beings. So for that reason, the external master is the spiritual friend, and the internal master is knowing the methods. And so the external spiritual friend is the Lama, the individual whom we can point to, who can actually teach us the practice, who gives us the instructions. But the internal spiritual master, being skilled in knowing the methods, is yourself. It's understanding what to do. It's making sure that all the it is said that whether we need to make Dharma into something that will actually become an antidote for the afflictions and make your being peaceful. So is the method working the message? Is this something that's actually to what is it? It's not like when placing a torma on the top of your head. It's not just like you. It's not like you. When you shoot a gun, you have to shoot it at the enemy. If you shoot it the other direction, it doesn't benefit. And so in the same way, you have to shoot it. So in the same way, if you take what the Dharma is and you practice it properly, then only at that point the connection between the Lama and the student becomes something that you teach. So the benefit of the Lama and the student is this. So when the student becomes a Lama's student, we say, please God, look at me with compassion. We say all this, but we have to look at that. When we talk in the Kagyu tradition about, bless me that our mind becomes inseparable for yours. And some people think about this, that it's something that the Lama's heart and the student's heart become the same thing. They become the same. Some people think this. If there were people who had two hearts, if we put the Lama's heart and the student's heart in the same body, it's not definite that they'd actually stay, that they'd work properly. This is something we have to think about. So if we don't understand what the connection of the Lama and the student. So when you talk about the mixing the body and the mind, the way we understand this is there are qualities what are the qualities that are present in the bodies, in the mind of the Lama? These are the qualities of abandonment and realization, the excellent wisdom, the excellent living kindness and compassion, having all this. And when we have to see whether the student is actually able to develop similar qualities themselves. And if the best good is if they're able to have the same type of Lama. If they have the same qualities of love and wisdom that appear at the same time, then at that point, then we say that the Lama and the student have mixed their minds and substance. It's not unless we take the heart out of the Lama's chest and put it into the student's chest, then that isn't what we mean. And so for these reasons, when you say that the way we need to understand the Buddha's, the master and student mixing their minds inseparable is this. And so it means that we need to practice the words. If we don't practice the words, they are dry words. For example, if someone who has no patience at all then talks about patience, then that's just a dry word. They can't practice patience at all. If there's someone who can actually practice patience, who says talks about being patient, then those words have moisture and life to them. They have power. And so it's important for us to actually put it into practice. And the result is perfect Buddhahood. And so just as when we're doing anything, we can talk about the results. There are many different explanations of the paths and the Buddhahood and so forth. We're talking about this time you receive, talking about what path, when do you realize emptiness, what level you do this, what level of realizations do the hearers and the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas have and so forth. But basically the result is made to take it. So what this means is the result, happiness is what we want. The result, the suffering is what we don't want. Even an animal, like an ant that has no eyes, who lives underneath the ground, whether they know how to think about happiness, but they go in the direction of getting happiness. They seek happiness, and we can all see this. However, where the difficulty comes, even though we normally want happiness, we don't know how to do it. Even though we don't want suffering, we don't know how to avoid it. And so we mix these two up. And this gives us great difficulties. And so for these reasons, even if we want to have a good result, we have to identify what the cause of it is. And so that we need to discriminate between what is good and is good. And so this way we talk about the how to achieve a good result and so forth. And what this means is that when we have farmers, think about how much effort farmers go into making a good crop grow. They get up early and stay up late. How much difficulty they do that? And when we want to have liberation and omniscience, and we say that, and we talk about talk about it in boast and fancy ways. I think that I'm going to achieve the greatest benefit for all sentient beings, and I need to do difficulties. Actually, if we're going to do that, this is the point here. But before that, but before that, there's actually a result that we can enjoy, that we can actually experience. But actually, when you talk, we don't really recognize what liberation and omniscience are. We don't really know what makes liberation and omniscience good. And we talk about liberation and omniscience, and sometimes we then think it may be better to have some sort of eat apples or eat oranges. We don't know. We look at the Buddhas, statues of Buddhas and so forth. We think, oh, they're sitting in meditation and so forth. Other than that, omniscience, which is something we don't really understand how important it is, how beneficial it is. And not understanding this, we don't have much interest in practicing in achieving liberation and omniscience. We need to understand it. We don't understand the purposes and the reasons behind it, and because of that, we think, oh, if I receive it or not, if I realize it or not, it doesn't make a difference. And so for this reason, we absolutely must we need to develop the mind of renunciation, or the wish for emancipation. at the root of everything, this wish for emancipation, or renunciation. And so in order to develop this, we need to understand what liberation is. We need the benefits of it. And once we understand that, then we think that we want to realize it, and that we realize that it's not for the benefit of ourselves, it's not for the benefit of all sentient beings throughout space. When we talk about liberation, is right now. It was something we need to begin right now, in this body, on this very seat. And so what this means is that we need to do the intentions and acts at the same time. Is that if we need when you think of it, you need to do it. If you think, I think of it today, I'm going to do it tomorrow, that doesn't work. And so for this reason, we need to think about the benefits, or it's important for us to understand the benefits of liberation. So for this reason, in terms of these six verses of the summary, we need to have these completed. And so now my time has pretty much gone for today, or for this morning.